Hello everybody, my name is Wemda Ransom and I'm your certified nurse midwife. I have the singular privilege to welcome you to part 2 of Should You Terminate That Child's Life? And just a brief review. Last video we're talking about what abortion is, induced abortion to be specific, and why some people decide to go take on this option. And today we're going to be building on the foundation we had laid. So just a very good advice: if you had not watched the previous video, it might be difficult for you to follow on this other video, so you can pause this right now and then go back to the previous video, part 1, and watch it so that you can be able to flow through into this other video. So buckle your seatbelts again. It is going to be a breathtaking ride. Different laws, different governments have various laws that govern abortion in various countries for their various reasons. But from Cameroon, Cameroon, where I hail from, has its own laws, very rigid, against abortion. It has penalties that are labeled against a woman who commits the act, who goes for the act, and the person who performs the act on her. They both have penalties to pay, and it is doubled when it is performed by a medical practitioner, and that medical practitioner could end up losing his or her license for doing that, except there are two provisions only for an abortion according to the Cameroon law, and that is section 339, which says, the first one, paraphrasing it, just says that it should be proven that it was necessary to save the life of the woman that was endangered, or the health of the woman that was gravely endangered, and it should be performed by a qualified person. That is the first clause. And the other is that the pregnancy should have resulted from rape, and before that abortion is conducted, is induced, that means the termination of the life of a living child. The termination of a life of a child, life of a living child is tautology, but we are talking about the termination of a living child. There should be a certificate obtained by a prosecution of a good case to allow for that procedure to happen. That is the law of Cameroon, and that is what it has to say about abortion. And this law and many other laws all over the world have caused women to go into the streets and say that the law is not advocating the rights of women and girls, and so they are fighting for the right of women and girls to be able to execute and induce abortion when they desire to. And that makes me ask myself, is it just the right of the women and the girls? I'm not refusing that we should advocate for the right of women and girls, but is it just the right of the women and girls that are at stake here? What about the child? Does the child have rights? Is the child considered a human being enough to have rights? Or when, the question could be, when do we consider a child a human, so that we can say human rights are applied also to the child as well as the mother? And this is a very crucial question with various concepts and notions or answers as to when human life begins. And the National Institute of Health says that human life should begin only after implantation. Implantation is when that cell that results from the fertilization of the egg and the sperm, like we have said earlier, it plants into the uterus and then continues that development and growing to maturity. The National Institute of Health says that until then, the zygote and its sequels are in a fluid process, and therefore not considered to be a physical human, and therefore not a person. So the National Institute of Health says that it's only after implantation that we can consider that life form as a human life. Another view is that of Professor Emeritus of Human Embryology of the University of Arizona School of Medicine, Dr. C. Ward, and he says that he affirms, and I quote, every human embryologist worldwide states that the life of a new individual human being begins from fertilization. So according to him, once the sperm meets with the egg and there is fertilization, that already is a human being. And the American College, another view by the American College of Pediatricians, concur with this view, saying that truly when a zygote is formed, a zygote is what results from that fertilization. When there is actual fertilization of the egg, a zygote is formed, a one-cell zygote, and it says that when that happens, that already is human life that has begun anew, unique. All right. Therefore, that is a human life and has human rights. And many other views exist with various reasons, all right, making them to differ, converge, all right, for different reasons. But there is one point that is undeniable. Motherhood unarguably begins from conception. Motherhood begins from conception, and therefore she is bound to carry and care for and nourish the embryo. This is true. Once fertilization happens, that woman is considered a mother because she already has life form within her developing, and therefore she should be able to protect and be protected by as well. Protected by the laws of the community in which she finds herself. And if motherhood is assumed at conception or fertilization, why should human life not begin also, or childhood begin for that little baby, or the life form that is beginning as well at that time? All right, that's just another way of thinking about it. Now, I would love to let's contemplate a little on this. Does the person who conducts those induced abortions really love you? Does that person not just think about what money he or she is going to gain after the procedure? Like, let me just get done with you, pack you off, and then have my money in my pocket? Is that not what that person is actually thinking? Do you think that the person actually loves you, who will conduct or perform such terminating the life of another human being in you and doing that kind of harm to you? All right? Is that, even if this resulted from incest, even if the life form of that child began as a result of incest or rape, should the child be penalized for that? What fault was it? What fault of the child was it that he has been brought into existence through that? Laws penalize rapists and the perpetrators of incest to severe degrees, different degrees, but I don't know of somebody who has been given a death sentence because of rape or incest. Maybe the conditions or the situations that surrounded the event might warrant a death request or a death verdict, but should it be the baby to suffer this effect? Should it be the baby to die or be killed? And you should know that some people never recover from an abortion. Once it has happened, they are haunted by this image that they have of a child that was living and was killed and then was sucked out, was dismantled and sucked out of the womb. Some people never come back from that. Some people, that was their last opportunity they had to harbor human life within them, and after that procedure they never have the opportunity to harbor a child again, and they wish they had that opportunity. Some people think that they have gone through whatever therapy and they are back, they are recovered, but then a year or two after, they see a child and their heart reaches out to the child, and they just vividly remember that if that pregnancy they terminated were allowed, that their own child would have been the age of that child, and immediately they crumble at that position, at that point, into various magnitudes of trauma. All right, and that is the scar. That is a scar that will be left on you and will follow you for long, even after God has forgiven you, or even after you've gotten you've been able to get over it, that scar remains. Okay, the memories will remain on you. So why do you really want to incur all of that? Why do you want to incur all of that? Just think about the survivors from such acts, people who have actually survived from rape. I mean, people who have survived abortion. How do they think in the society when they move about? How do they feel when we are so strongly persisting that the rights for a woman to commit an abortion must be made legal? How do you think they feel who survive an abortion? I heard a touching story of a twin that survived an abortion. Just one of them. The other was killed. And she asked, after she had told her story, she asked one question that really, really touched me to the heart. She asked, how did it feel? How did my twin feel when she or he was being killed? How did it feel? And society, let's ask ourselves, how do these people feel? Maybe let's not even go far, all right? Let's not go far searching YouTube to find stories or confession or testimonials of survivors of abortion. I might be, you listening to this video right now might be one survivor of abortion. So society, how do we actually expect these people to feel when we go about? The irony of this is sometimes we are the ones who caused the deformations or the incapacitation of these children because of the way we lived, the poor living standards and conditions that we exposed the baby to. For instance, drinking at an early stage of pregnancy, within the first month of pregnancy, when you barely even know. Some people don't even get a sign that they are pregnant till very, very later in the pregnancy before they finally get the sign that they are pregnant. And probably you were taking alcohol, and alcohol interferes with the development of the child, or maybe impairs the child mentally. When the child finally comes, the child is impaired. Okay, physically impaired, incapacitated, but that is because of the way the child was treated by the environment into which the child was born. And so that is a way that we have incapacitated the child. But we say that one of the reasons to commit an abortion is that that child is going to be a liability to the society. But we caused that, we contributed to that by our lifestyle. All right? Doesn't the law itself make provision that the incapacitated and the vulnerable should be protected? I mean, if you have two individuals, one that is capable of providing and protecting his or herself, providing for and protecting his or herself, or another person who is unable, who is physically unable to protect his or herself, does the law and logic and human thinking, conscience not say that we should protect that person who is unable to meet his or her basic needs? So when we rationalize abortion, I think that we are spending much time on and focusing on some other thing, which is just a portion of the discussion. What if we thought this other way? What if we strengthen sex education at home as parents and at school before the society and the ills of our time teach those children to carry about their sexuality in a whole nother unpleasing way? What if we invested time to teach those children about sex, and so that they're well educated and they will not end up with unwanted pregnancies and become dangerous not just to themselves and you as a mother or you as a father, but to the society in which they live? All right? What if families, or family planning rather, was taught to teens and adults, to married and unmarried alike? What about, it's really unfortunate that some governments, they have prohibited the teaching of family planning methods and the use of them as well for their reasons. But that is very, very unfortunate. What if we instituted laws that hold men responsible for the pregnancies they father? all right, and bring anyone to book who crimes against a woman, who is a sex violator or a rapist. That's to the powers that be. What if we focus on enforcing those laws and making sure that anyone comes to book who violates those laws? What if we rather focused on strengthening rehabilitation and adoption centers and funding them so that those women who are not able to care for the children have somewhere those children they are not able to care for are being looked after and brought up? What if we focused on that? Why do we treat women who are pregnant as if they incurred in schools and at work? Why do we treat them as if they came down with an infectious disease, a very infectious disease, and they don't have privileges, they don't have considerations for their state as pregnant women? Why do partners actually reject their spouses and their own children and then leave the woman alone to shoulder all or almost all of the responsibility of caring for that new life form? Women are pushed to the wall when their partner is not there to support them, when the family is not there to support them, their community, probably even their society is not there to support them, and all they have is their will and the limited resources they have to support the pregnancy. Trust me, wherever these are exhausted, the will and the limited resources, that woman can give up on the pregnancy. Even if she has put to birth, she might give up on taking care of that child and nurturing that child as that child normally should be nurtured. But this is not what we focus on most of the times. Rather, we focus on something else that will not build our society. But then what does God think about it? God recognizes human beings even before they gain any form or resemblance of any sort, and he has purposes and plans for them. This is backed by Psalm 139, the verses 15 and 16. Why do we want to interrupt a life form that has been identified and has been acknowledged by God as human life? Alright, Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5, and I would like to read what the NIV version says. It says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Indeed, it's beyond scientific explanation to tell those little developmental stages in the womb that happen to the baby and why they happen. This is definitely God's work. And if God recognizes and acknowledges and makes room for these people, why do we fight against what God himself acknowledges and welcomes and has actually planted and instituted and has planned for, and whose future he has actually prepared as well? This is not a fight. This is not a fight against the violation of the right of women and girl children. No, this is a fight against God, and it began way back in the Garden of Eden when God proclaimed this verdict against the serpent, that is the devil, and he said that, and I quote in Genesis chapter 3 verse 15, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers, and he will crush your head and you will strike his heel. This is referring to there are two different individuals or entities identified here. There is a he and there is a you. He will crush your head. He will crush your head refers to the offspring, okay? The offspring, and it is one person is referring to. And you, you will strike his heel. The you there is referring to the devil who came through the serpent and made man to fall. Man as Adam, right? Man as mankind, all right? Made man to fall. And that verdict that God made, that prophecy God made, was taken very seriously by the devil. And immediately in the next chapter, he kills a godly offspring, Abel. Cain, the Bible says that Cain was of the devil. He killed a godly offspring, and that is the devil making sure that that offspring that God prophesied about does not come into existence. And he fought that battle from then. The battle still rages now. That is the actual battle that is going on. And even though women think that these laws are there to infringe on their rights, rather God's community is built to support the rights of women, to protect women, to protect girl children, to protect pregnancy. And this is seen in Exodus chapter 21, the verses 22 to 25. And it basically says that if two men were fighting, in the process of fighting, they caused a woman, they hit a woman and caused her to deliver prematurely. Any fine that the husband of this woman places on them and is allowed by the court, they were supposed to meet. And if by hitting this woman they caused an injury, this is when things really get interesting. If they caused injury to the woman, you are to take, verse 23 says, you are to take life for life. Verse 24 says, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. 25 says, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. That means whatever magnitude of injury you inflicted on this woman and her child, that very magnitude will be measured back to you. If it was very huge as it is, it will be measured back to you, the two men who are fighting, and caused that. That is God's covenant community. That is God protecting his people. All right. And I know that the video has gone quite long, but just hang on with me. We are coming to a close. We are coming to a close right there. And many times the devil has made you believe that God's community or God's laws, God's commandments, they are meant to infringe on your rights and to limit you and to cave you in. But no, those are the laws that actually give your freedom. True and ultimate freedom comes from God's law. And our society today could actually take God to court and sue him for having increased the pain of childbirth, because Genesis chapter 3 verse 16, when God had finished giving a verdict of the serpent, the devil, he gave that of the woman, saying that I am going to greatly increase childbirth. And our generation today can actually take God to court and say, you caused us this pain, this much pain that we experience during childbirth. So by that, they could even take as a license for abortion, saying that because we want to avoid this pain, we would rather undergo abortion. That is how depraved our society right now is, believe me or not. Looking at the way our society is evolving or changing and developing, I wonder if we were in the shoes of Mary at the time Christ was going to be born, or she was pregnant with Jesus in the womb. How many women would have agreed to keep the pregnancy? The tendency is, since he had no earthly father, he will be termed a bastard. And who would want to bear the child that has no earthly father? How many women? And how many husbands would have supported that? How many partners would have supported that? Your fiancé or your wife is with child, and the child is not yours. How many of you would have been a support to her through 9 months and then delivery, and still looked at that child as your own child? How many of our families would have believed the story of Mary, that I am pregnant but I have not met with any man? How many of would our society even accept that? Would they not just label her with a lot of hideous labels and names and titles and slangs thrown at her wherever she shows up, even at prenatals? How would we have welcomed it? Would we have allowed that child to go through 9 months? Would we not have just launched several induced abortion attempts at that pregnancy? But interestingly, it wouldn't have worked. That child was definitely going to be born. But that's just something for you to think about. Would you have allowed the pregnancy to go on? And as a partner, would you have supported your wife or your fiance through that process?
saying that you have not met with her. She's a virgin, but she's with child.
But God's way will stand. What God has ordained will by no means fail. What God has ordained will definitely stand. And even though the devil fought right from the Garden of Eden right from Adam, Cain and Abel, against the coming of that offspring, the offspring finally came. And at his birth, the mother attempt was launched, but failed. It failed, but the devil did not give up hopes. When it was realized that the attempt failed, a genocide was launched against any child that was going to be anywhere around the age of baby Jesus. That genocide order was given, and every child around the age of Jesus Christ, around the vicinity where Jesus Christ was born, was killed. And what was their crime? Their crime was that they were born around the time which Jesus Christ was born. Can you imagine? That is how fiercely that battle has been fought from time immemorial up to date. But the offspring was born. Jesus Christ was that offspring God prophesied about. He was born, he lived, and when he died, I'm imagining that the world and the enemy was, yay, finally we got him. But he did not know that what he had done was planting a seed. He planted a seed that was going to grow into eternity and yield fruit for eternity, unstoppably. Okay, this is something that if the Bible says that if they knew what they were doing, they wouldn't have crucified the Lord, because they just started a movement of flamed a fire that was going to burn so wild throughout the whole earth. And this fire is going to continue, but the battle will not stop. All right, the battle is not going to stop with you and me. The battle is going to continuously rage very fiercely. It's going to continue beyond us, and it is so bad that someone will say, I desire to have an induced abortion because this is my life. It is my life, and this baby is going to rid me of the ability to enjoy my life. So I have to do away with this baby so that I can enjoy my life. The life is mine. That is a reason for which some people want to have this. So when next you consider having an induced abortion, think about this. On a human being, think about this. Ask yourself, if that pregnancy really, really is detrimental to your life or puts your life at risk as a woman, because that is a human being right there. According to God's view, that is a human being. Think also about this as a partner. You will not be, you're not going to be left scot-free. You will be held accountable if you don't discharge of your responsibilities towards that woman, your partner, and your child. You are not going to go scot-free. And in conclusion, I call upon you to choose God's way. Aside other propositions that the world puts before us right now, I call upon you, I charge you to choose God's way, because God's way is the safest, and God has you in interest. All right, he has your interest in his mind, and so choose God's way rather than the devil's way, because what the devil is trying to do is what he did in the Garden of Eden. He wants to deceive you like he deceived man, and tell you or make you question God's will for you, make you question if God's will and God's ways really, really are the best for you, so that you will do what man did in the Garden of Eden, and you will fall. Don't let the devil win this battle in your life. Thank you.